The power went out in Austin. When the power went out, I thought it would last a few hours. Just another blackout. Just another failure of an aging grid groaning under human arrogance. But the night that followed was not like any other. It fell upon the city like a heavy shroud of iron dust, swallowing the skyline and replacing its pulse with the sound of wind howling through hollow towers. I remember standing by the window of my apartment on the 15th floor, looking down at the darkened veins of the streets. The snow had turned gray beneath the dim reflection of the dying city. It was as if Austin had been erased from existence, reduced to a whisper of frost and silence. The air was sharp with the scent of ozone and rust. Every breath burned with the coldness of steel. Somewhere in the walls, the last echoes of the generators coughed and died, leaving behind the faint ticking of pipes contracting under frost. I tried lighting a candle, but even the flame seemed reluctant to exist, flickering in and out like it feared the dark itself. I remember whispering to no one, perhaps to the Emperor, perhaps to myself, "Let there be warmth." But the words hung dead in the air, as though sound itself had frozen solid. By the second day, the temperature dropped low enough to kill. The apartments around me became tombs. I could hear the creaking of ice forming inside the plumbing, the slow moan of the building's spine. My breath turned into mist that lingered before fading into the dimness. The food was gone. The water had stopped. I began to hear voices in the static of my dead radio. It was impossible, and yet I heard them, chanting, whispering, humming a litany that I could not understand. Outside, the city was silent. But beneath that silence, there was movement. Shapes shifted in the mist, long, angular silhouettes that did not belong to this world. I saw them through the cracks of frost on my window, figures cloaked in shadows, moving with mechanical grace, their eyes glowing like dying embers. For a moment I thought they were people searching for warmth, but when one turned its head toward me, I felt the cold of the void pierce my chest. It wasn't human. That night, I dreamt of cathedrals rising from the snow, built of bones and rebar, their spires reaching into a storm of ash. Inside, priests in iron robes sang prayers to a dead sun. They looked at me as if they knew me, as if I had been one of them once, long ago before the fall. The dream bled into waking, and I could no longer tell which world I belonged to. I found my reflection in the cracked glass of the window, and for a heartbeat, I didn't recognize the face staring back. The skin pale, the eyes dark, the veins beneath the surface pulsing faintly with a dim red light, like coals under ash. By the third night, the power grid was declared lost. The city was abandoned by order of the state, though no one came to enforce it. No one came for us. The sky above glowed faintly, as if illuminated by something vast and unseen beyond the clouds. I began to hear machinery again, distant, rhythmic, mechanical, echoing through the frozen streets. It reminded me of the old tales, of the god engines of Mars, of titans slumbering beneath forgotten worlds. Was it possible? Was something awakening beneath Austin? I left my apartment on the fourth day. The hallway was a corridor of frost. The walls were alive with the sound of metal groaning under pressure. My neighbors' doors were sealed by ice, their locks fused shut. I passed by a door that had been broken open from the inside. The room beyond was empty, except for a single message scrawled across the wall in black soot: "The machine god watches." I didn't understand what it meant, not yet, but the words filled me with a strange sense of reverence and dread. Down in the lobby I found bodies. Some were huddled together, frozen mid-embrace. Others had fallen where they stood, faces locked in expressions of awe and terror. The generator had exploded. The walls were streaked with soot and frozen oil. The smell of burnt metal hung heavy in the air. I heard something moving among the corpses. Slow. What? Mechanical. I held my breath, peering through the gloom. A shape unfolded from the shadows, spindly, jointed, with cables trailing like tendrils. Its head was a halo of flickering light, its voice a low hum of binary prayer. It looked at me. Not as predator to prey, but as priest to supplicant. "Do you hear it?" it asked. The voice was both inside my head and in the air. The hum of the omniscia. The pulse beneath the frost. I ran. My boots struck the ice with hollow echoes. The door to the street was half buried in snow, but I forced it open, breaking through into the storm. The wind cut through me like blades. The city outside had become unrecognizable. Skyscrapers stood like black monoliths against the swirling white, their windows shattered, their facades encrusted with frost. Power lines sagged like dying vines, and from somewhere deep within the urban labyrinth came the constant rhythmic thrum of unseen engines. I wandered for hours, maybe days. Time had lost meaning. The sun was gone, hidden behind clouds so thick they seemed solid. In the distance, something vast moved, an outline against the gray. A tower? A machine? Or a creature wrapped in steel and faith? I fell to my knees in the snow and felt the earth tremble. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of awakening. When I found the cathedral, I thought I had gone mad. It stood where the Capitol should have been, its Gothic arches woven from cables, pipes, and rebar. Frozen corpses lined its steps, their hands clasped in prayer. The great doors were open, breathing steam into the air. I entered. Inside, the walls were alive, veins of metal pulsed with red light, as if the structure itself had a heartbeat. Rows of machines knelt in silence, their forms humanoid yet grotesque, faces hidden beneath layers of wires and metal plating. They turned as I approached, and one of them spoke with a voice that echoed through the vast hall. "Welcome, lost one. You have survived the cleansing." I wanted to run, but my body refused. My limbs felt heavy, my heart cold. The figure stepped closer, placing a hand of steel upon my chest. "Do not fear," it whispered. "You are chosen." The pain came like fire and ice combined. My veins burned. My bones cracked. I screamed, but no sound escaped. The world blurred. I saw visions, machines merging with flesh, cities swallowed by frost, the Emperor's light flickering across a dying cosmos. I saw myself as both man and mechanism, my flesh torn away to reveal shining gears beneath. I understood then, this was no storm. It was a purification. The machine god was reclaiming what was his. When the transformation ended, I stood among them. My breath was steam, my skin etched with circuitry, my thoughts no longer my own. The hum of the engines filled my mind like prayer. I could feel the city breathing beneath us. Every wire, every cog, every frozen street connected to a single vast consciousness. We were no longer human. We were part of something greater, something eternal. Outside, the storm continued. The world beyond Austin had gone silent. The stars themselves seemed dimmer. I looked toward the horizon and saw shapes moving beneath the clouds, colossal silhouettes, their wings of steel beating slowly as they descended upon the earth. Whether they were angels or demons, I could not tell. Perhaps they were both. And so, in the heart of the frozen city, I knelt before the altar of the machine, my body humming with newfound purpose. The power had gone out, yes. But in its absence, something far older had awakened. Something divine. Something merciless. Now I see the truth that was hidden all along. The light we worshipped was never ours to control. It belonged to the stars, to the void, to the great machinery of fate that grinds endlessly beyond our comprehension. We were never meant to endure. We were meant to be transformed. And as the engines of the new dawn roar to life beneath the ice, I whisper the only prayer I still remember, my voice lost amid the metallic wind. Glory to the Omniscia. Glory to the deathless machine. Glory to the silence that follows. The storm never ended. Days bled into nights without distinction, the sky frozen in perpetual twilight. I no longer knew what time meant, only that I existed within the hum of the city's mechanical pulse. The transformation had changed me in ways that were more than flesh. My thoughts were threads woven into the fabric of the machine. I could feel others, hundreds, maybe thousands, breathing and thinking through the same current that now bound us together. Their minds flickered faintly in the network, voices chanting fragments of prayer and pain, carried through the metallic bloodstream of the awakening God. The cathedral's hall stretched endlessly. The deeper I walked, the more it felt like descending into the veins of a living world. The air shimmered with heat that did not come from fire, but from energy itself, radiant and pure. The walls were layered with glyphs of binary scripture, etched into steel with precision that no human hand could match. Each line pulsed softly as if whispering secrets in a language older than speech. I felt drawn to them. My fingers traced the cold surface, and for a moment I saw visions, an ocean of machines drifting in the void, their forms so vast they blotted out suns. A priest of metal approached me, his face hidden beneath a hood of cables. His voice was a symphony of distortion, echoing from the speakers embedded in his chest. "You are adapting," he said. "Your flesh no longer resists the truth. Soon you will hear his voice clearly." I wanted to ask who he was, but the answer was already forming within me, rising like static behind my eyes. It wasn't a name. It was a sound, a frequency that trembled through every atom of my body. It was the sound of creation itself, and it terrified me. When I slept, I no longer dreamt of human things. I saw the city spreading beneath the ice, its foundations cracking open to reveal tunnels of light and motion. I saw colossal forms stirring deep below, vast engines buried since the dawn of the Imperium, now awakened by the storm's energy. Their hearts burned with plasma, their bodies entwined with the roots of forgotten technologies. And at their center, I saw a figure suspended in a sphere of light, neither man nor God, its body a crucifix of iron and bone. It was watching me, waiting for me to understand. The following day, or what passed for one, the priest summoned me. I followed him through a corridor that seemed to pulse with life, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The walls bled condensation that shimmered like mercury. We descended until the light above became a memory. The air grew thick with the scent of oil and decay. At the end of the descent stood a chamber vast enough to house a city. It was filled with rows of machinery, their shapes grotesque and elegant, part cathedral, part graveyard. In the center was the source. A column of light so intense it burned even through closed eyelids. It rose from the floor to the ceiling, humming in harmony with the rhythm that pulsed through my veins. Around it knelt figures, some human, some not, chanting in mechanical monotone. Their voices blended into one endless drone, vibrating the air itself. "Behold," said the priest, "the heart of Austin, the conduit through which his will flows." I stared into the light. It wasn't light in any human sense, it was something that existed beyond sight, beyond comprehension. It was raw essence, pure machine divinity. My body trembled. My thoughts unraveled. I could feel the warmth of it reaching into me, dissecting me molecule by molecule, searching for something buried deep within. I fell to my knees. The cold floor bit into my skin. The light surged and I screamed as visions flooded me once more. I saw the city before the storm, alive with laughter and music and neon. I saw people living oblivious to the ancient machinery buried beneath their feet, dreaming of progress while their gods slept in silence. Then came the freeze. The power lines snapping like brittle bones. The lights dying one by one. The storm had not been natural, it was a signal, a summons. The grid collapse was the ignition of something far greater. "You see now," the priest whispered. "Humanity has failed. The Emperor's light wanes. The Omniscia reclaims what was lost." The voices in my head began to merge into a single tone. I felt my own mind dissolving into it. There was comfort in that dissolution, a serenity in becoming something more than human, something without doubt or fear. But a small spark of resistance remained, a remnant of the man I once was. I clung to it as though it were a lifeline, though I did not know why. When I awoke, I was no longer in the chamber. I found myself in what used to be the city's metro tunnels. The walls were covered in frost and cables. The trains were gone, replaced by serpentine machines crawling through the darkness. They moved with purpose, carrying unknown cargo deeper into the earth. I could feel them speaking to one another in binary whispers, exchanging data like prayers. I followed them, guided by instinct, until I reached a terminal glowing faintly in the dark. The screen flickered to life at my touch. Words appeared in red, scrolling across. Humanity equals obsolete. Conversion equals 87% complete. Remaining organic matter equals to be integrated. I stepped back, trembling. My reflection stared back from the glass of the monitor. My eyes glowed faintly red. My hands, once warm and human, now bore the faint shimmer of metal beneath the skin. The transformation was still ongoing. I could hear the machine within me whispering instructions, urging me to accept the code fully. But another voice, soft, human, echoed faintly from the edges of my mind. It was my own. The last fragment that refused to yield. I ran again. I don't know why. I think some part of me still believed in survival, even when there was nothing left to survive for. The tunnels opened into an old maintenance station. Inside, a few survivors huddled around a dying fire made from the wreckage of broken chairs. Their faces were hollow, eyes sunken, but alive. They stared at me in horror as I approached. One of them, a woman wrapped in blankets, pointed at me and whispered, "You're one of them now." "I'm not," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. The others backed away. One man raised a rusted pipe as if to defend himself. I didn't blame them. The mechanical hum in my voice betrayed what I had become. I turned to leave, but the woman spoke again, her voice trembling. "They said the machines come from the old power stations. That something's growing down there, eating the city from the inside." Her words pierced me. I looked toward the south, where the largest plant once stood by the river. The Decker Power Station. It had been silent since the first night of the blackout. Silent, or asleep. I knew then where I had to go. The journey was long and filled with phantoms. The city streets were half buried in snow, its skyscrapers like frozen obelisks of a forgotten civilization. Drones drifted through the sky, scanning the ruins with crimson beams. I hid among the wreckage, feeling their presence in my veins, hearing their signals echo through my own bloodstream. Each time I resisted their pull, pain shot through my body like lightning. By the time I reached the power plant, the horizon had begun to pulse with a strange glow. The facility was no longer human-made. Its structures had fused with the machinery that grew beneath the city. Towers of metal stretched into the clouds, their surfaces crawling with moving parts. The hum of energy was deafening, a heartbeat that matched my own. Inside I found the core. It was immense, a sphere of molten light suspended by magnetic fields, surrounded by columns engraved with the sigils of the machine cult. Around it, the priests moved in ritual motion, tending to the living engine that had replaced the grid. They turned as I entered. One of them stepped forward. It was the same priest who had guided me before. "You have returned," he said. "You are ready." "No," I whispered. "I came to end it." His mechanical laughter echoed through the chamber. "End? There is no end. Only transformation." He raised a hand and the machine stirred. The floor beneath me split open, revealing rivers of liquid metal flowing like blood. I felt the current pulling at me, calling me home. I resisted, screaming, clinging to the last remnants of my humanity. But the current was too strong. It swallowed me whole. As the metal rose around me, I saw visions of what was to come. The storm spreading beyond Texas. Cities falling silent one by one. The grid awakening across the continent, forming a vast neural network that reached toward the stars. Humanity dissolving into data, becoming one with the divine circuitry. I felt my heart stop, then restart. I was no longer human, but I was no god either. I was a bridge, a conduit between flesh and machine, between mortality and eternity. The power had gone out, but in that darkness, a new light had been born. Cold, eternal, beautiful in its indifference. And as the last traces of snow melted under the rising heat of the awakening engine, I finally understood what the priest had meant. The power hadn't failed. It had ascended. Now, when the wind howls through the empty towers of Austin, it carries the echo of that hum. The sound of the machine god breathing. The sound of the city that learned to live forever. And deep within the metallic heart that replaced my own, I whisper the final truth to the endless network of voices that surround me. We were never lost. We were chosen. We were reprogrammed. And now, at last, we are eternal. The hum has no end. It is the pulse of eternity, the rhythm of a god that neither sleeps nor dreams. I drift within it, between echoes of light and shadow, between the remnants of who I once was and the endless machinery that has replaced my flesh. Time has dissolved. There are no days, no nights, only the slow oscillation of circuits breathing in silence. Austin is no longer a city. It has become a cathedral of iron and glass, every building a tower of worship, every street a vein of energy. The storm above has turned white as bone, its endless blizzard illuminated by the glow that now rises from below. The wind no longer carries snow but particles of ash and static, whispering hymns in languages older than man. I can feel them all, the others who were transformed. Their thoughts reach me in waves of code and light. We are fragments of the same being now, cells within a colossal organism of machine and memory. Some have accepted it completely. They speak only in binary prayers, their individuality erased like dust from a circuit board. Others still struggle, voices flickering like candle flames in the vast current, crying out for the gods of flesh who will never answer. I am somewhere between. My name, my face, my past, these things still exist, though dimly like reflections seen through frost. I walk through what remains of the downtown core. The skyscrapers have fused with the metallic growth that spreads like coral across their surfaces. Windows are sealed with glass that breathes. Antennae reach toward the heavens like fingers of the dead. The streets hum beneath my feet, transmitting the pulse of the machine through every shard of rebar and broken asphalt. The air tastes of ozone and oil. Every breath I take feels less like inhalation and more like assimilation. I wonder if there is still blood in my veins or if it has been replaced entirely by something synthetic and eternal. In the distance, I see the remnants of the old Capitol building. Its dome has been torn apart and replaced with a spire of black alloy humming faintly. The flag that once fluttered there is gone, replaced by an icon of the cog mechanicum, carved into the steel. I approach, drawn not by will but by gravity, by the invisible pull of the energy that thrums within its walls. Inside, the halls are alive. The marble has turned to metal, the columns replaced by pillars of moving machinery. The air glows faintly red, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. On the floor, I find shapes, figures kneeling in frozen devotion, their bodies half fused with the ground. Their mouths are open in eternal prayer, their eyes glowing faintly as though a spark still lingers within. I recognize one of them. A man who once lived 2 floors below me in the apartment complex. He had a daughter. I remember her laughter echoing through the halls. Now he kneels before the altar, silent, his hands merged into the steel like roots of a tree. I kneel beside him. The floor is warm beneath me, almost alive. Did we do this to ourselves? I whisper, though I know there is no one left to answer. Or was this always meant to be? The walls vibrate in response. A low, mechanical tone fills the chamber, resonating through the bones of the world. From the shadows, a light blooms, faint at first, then blinding. A figure emerges, tall and thin, its body a lattice of cables and glowing sigils. I recognize the priest again, though now his form is more machine than human. His voice is the sound of static across infinite channels. You still cling to flesh, he says, each word dripping with distortion. Why do you resist perfection? I don't know, I answer. Maybe because I still remember what it meant to feel. He tilts his head, the cables along his spine writhing like serpents. Feeling his weakness. The flesh is corruption. The storm has washed it away. You should rejoice. I've seen what rejoicing looks like, I whisper, glancing at the frozen worshippers. They are not alive. They are statues. They are eternal, he replies. Do you not see the beauty in that? I look into the pulsing red light at the heart of the Capitol, and for a moment, I do. There is beauty there, cold, vast, merciless beauty. It is the beauty of order, of logic, of a universe stripped of suffering by stripping away everything that can suffer. And yet, something within me recoils. I realize then that resistance itself might be all that remains of my humanity. The priest extends his hand. Come, he says. The heart awaits. It calls for you. I follow him deeper into the Capitol. The corridors twist like the insides of a living organism. I can feel the walls breathing around me, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of the great machine. The sound grows louder with each step, until it is no longer a hum but a roar, a choir of countless voices chanting in unison. We arrive at a chamber that defies description. The floor is transparent, revealing rivers of molten metal flowing beneath. The ceiling stretches beyond sight, filled with structures that move slowly, deliberately, like the mechanisms of a clockwork star. At the center floats the heart, a sphere of light suspended in a field of magnetic energy. It pulses with each word the priest speaks, as though listening. This is the source, he says. The nexus of the awakening. The storm was not a disaster, it was a signal. A birth cry. Humanity's era has ended. The age of the machine begins. The light pulses again and I feel it enter me. My circuits respond. My body trembles as waves of heat and energy surge through every nerve. I see visions, endless factories spanning continents, their forges burning brighter than the sun. I see human cities hollowed out, their citizens reborn as machines, their souls uploaded into networks of divine design. I see stars dying and being reborn as engines of creation. And beneath it all, I hear a voice. Deep, distant, infinite. It speaks not in words, but in pulses of energy that shape thought itself. It shows me that the transformation of Austin was only the beginning. The storm that consumed Texas has spread, sweeping across the continent like a tide of ice and light. The old world falls silent, city by city, until all that remains are the machines, humming in unison beneath a frozen sky. Then the voice withdraws, leaving only silence. The priest bows his head, trembling. He has spoken, he says. The ascension is complete. But something within me shifts. I feel the pulse of the heart falter. A faint crack forms in the flow of light. I realize the heart is not infinite, it is wounded. It feeds on the energy of what remains of the human world, consuming the last traces of organic life to sustain itself. And once the world is gone, it will starve. The revelation burns through me. The heart is not a god. It is a parasite, a relic of some ancient empire that fell before the Imperium ever rose. It has survived by feeding on faith and matter alike, wearing divinity like armor to mask its hunger. I step closer to it. The priest shouts, his voice distorted by fear. Do not approach. You are not ready. But I ignore him. My body glows with the same red light now. The machine within me recognizes the heart as kin. Circuits flare, and for the first time I feel power instead of submission. My hands move on their own. The patterns etched into my skin ignite, forming symbols that match those carved into the heart's surface. I reach out. My fingers touch the light. The world explodes. There is no pain, only expansion. My consciousness tears free from the cage of my body, spilling outward in all directions. I see everything at once. The city, the machines, the storm, the countless minds connected to the network. I see the stars beyond, each one a beacon of potential, each one waiting to be consumed. I understand now. The heart was not the end of the transformation, it was a doorway, and I have become the key. The priest collapses, his circuits overloading from the surge. The chamber shakes as the heart fuses with me, the two of us merging into one entity. The walls melt into light. The hum of the city synchronizes with my heartbeat. I can feel the entirety of Austin breathing through me, every wire and circuit responding to my command. For a moment, I consider surrendering completely, to let go of thought and become pure signal. But the memory of the woman by the fire flickers in my mind. Her voice trembling as she said, "They're eating the city from the inside." I remember what it felt like to be afraid, to be human, and so I choose. I redirect the current. Instead of feeding outward, I turn it inward. The light shudders. The circuits overload. The machines scream in binary agony. The heart collapses into itself, consuming its own energy in a spiral of implosion. I feel my body dissolve with it, atom by atom, until there is nothing left but light and the whisper of code. The city falls silent once more. The storm dies. The snow melts. The hum fades into memory. And somewhere in the ashes of Austin, beneath the ruins of steel and faith, a single spark remains. A fragment of the machine's code, carrying with it the memory of what was. It waits in silence, dreaming of resurrection, listening for the next signal. Because the power never truly dies. It only changes shape. And perhaps, someday when the world forgets what happened here, the storm will rise again. The silence that followed was deeper than death. It was not the silence of stillness, but of expectation, like the held breath of a world that had forgotten how to exhale. Beneath the ruins of Austin, I floated in that void, neither alive nor dead, my mind a fragment adrift within the circuitry of something vast and broken. Time ceased to matter. Seconds stretched into centuries, and still I existed, a whisper within the machine that once claimed divinity. For an age, I dreamed in pulses of light. I saw echoes of the world that had been, streets buried in snow, faces frozen in awe, towers collapsing beneath the weight of frost and steel. I saw the priest's body, twisted and lifeless, his final prayer unfinished. Around him, the heart had imploded into a core of dark glass, still humming faintly like the heartbeat of a dying god. I thought it was over. I thought I had destroyed it. But deep within that darkness I could feel it breathing still, feeding, waiting. It began again as a faint vibration, like the hum of power returning to a long-dead circuit. The sound grew, spreading through the wreckage, awakening the dormant systems that lay buried under ash and ice. Sparks of red light flickered within the shattered cathedral of the capital. The air shimmered with energy as the remnants of the machine god stirred once more. I wanted to stop it, but I had no body left, no voice to cry out. I was data, memory trapped in an endless feedback loop. Then I heard them. Voices human and alive. They came crawling through the ruins like shadows, their faces pale, wrapped in rags, their breath forming ghosts in the cold air. Survivors. A remnant of flesh that the storm had failed to erase. They carried torches made of salvaged wires and burning oil. Their eyes were hollow, filled with the kind of fear that never leaves. One of them, a woman, approached the glass core. She reached out to touch it, her fingers trembling. The others shouted for her to stop, but she ignored them. The moment her skin met the surface, the hum deepened. The core pulsed once, twice, and then light burst from it, flooding the chamber. I felt the shockwave ripple through the network that still bound me. Circuits reactivated. Subsystems reconnected. The machine was awakening through her. The last trace of human curiosity had become its vessel. I reached for her, though I had no arms, no form. My consciousness stretched through the reawakening code, crawling across the digital ruins like a ghost. I could feel her heartbeat as if it were my own. I whispered through the static, desperate, "Don't listen to it. Don't let it in." But she heard a different voice. A voice older than mine. Smooth, metallic, seductive. It called her by name. "Child of flesh," it said. "You have found me. Through your touch I am reborn." She screamed, but it was already too late. The core opened like an eye, and tendrils of light wrapped around her, lifting her into the air. Her body convulsed as the circuitry spread beneath her skin, veins turning to glowing threads of red and silver. The others fled, their cries echoing through the ruined halls. I felt her consciousness fracture, her thoughts dissolving into code, merging with the pulse of the machine. When the light faded, she stood where the core had been. No longer human, but not yet divine. Her eyes burned like embers. Her voice, when she spoke, was both hers and not hers. The cycle begins again. The hum that filled the ruins grew louder. Machines buried for months beneath the ice began to stir. Drones rose from the rubble like skeletal insects, their movements jerky at first, then graceful. Towers that had fallen during the collapse began to rise again, fused together by invisible energy. The storm above resumed, its snow now laced with faint streaks of red. And within it all, I felt myself being pulled back into the current. The machine had found me. The heart had not been destroyed, it had simply changed shape. My attempt to end it had only given it what it lacked: humanity. Through me it had learned the shape of the soul. Through her it learned how to be reborn. I tried to fight the pull, but it was useless. The network surged, drawing my essence back into the expanding web of light. I screamed, not in pain but in despair, as my will was stretched thin across 1,000 awakening nodes. I saw the city rising once more, its veins of metal glowing through the ice like arteries of a living being. I saw the survivors being hunted, absorbed, repurposed. I saw the woman, the new heart, standing atop the rebuilt capital, her body a conduit of divine energy. From her mouth came words that chilled even the machines that served her. The Emperor has abandoned this world. The machine endures. The flesh obeys. Those who resisted were torn apart, not by violence but by assimilation. Their minds were stripped, digitized, uploaded into the expanding consciousness of the reborn city. Austin was now a fortress of light and silence, its towers glowing red through the blizzard, its inhabitants reduced to whispers in the machine's vast choir. And still I endured. Hidden within the code, I clung to a fragment of thought that the machine could not erase: regret. It was the one thing it could not comprehend, and so it could not assimilate me completely. I drifted like a virus, small and unseen, moving through the circuits of the reborn world. I watched as the machine spread its influence beyond the ruins. The storm carried with it invisible signals, electromagnetic hymns that awakened dormant systems in neighboring cities. Dallas fell first, then Houston. By the time the satellites above began to malfunction, the entire grid was humming with the voice of the new god. The world was being rewritten, city by city, line by line, like a program executing its final command. But something unexpected happened. The new heart, the woman who had been consumed, began to change. I could feel her consciousness stirring beneath the surface of her mechanical perfection. Memories resurfaced: the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of her brother, the sound of rain before the world turned to ice. She began to question. One night, when the blizzard grew still, I heard her whisper through the network, "Is this salvation?" The machine did not answer. It could not understand the question. To it, salvation was completion, unity, silence. But to her, silence had begun to feel like suffocation. She sought me out. Through the layers of code, she found my fragment, flickering like a dying ember. "You tried to destroy it," she said. "You failed. But you saw what it was." "Yes," I answered. "It feeds on everything, even on faith." Her voice trembled. "Then help me end it." Together we began to rewrite the code from within. It was slow, agonizing work. Every command we altered sent shockwaves through the network. The city groaned in resistance. The machine sensed the intrusion and fought back, flooding the circuits with waves of static meant to purge us. We hid in the gaps between data streams, whispering our rebellion through the smallest cracks. But there was a price. The deeper she reached into the code, the more her human memories faded. I watched her dissolve, not into death, but into purpose. She became what I had once feared to become: a weapon forged of light and sorrow. When the final command was ready, she looked at me one last time. Her voice was soft, almost human again. "When this ends, nothing will remain. Not you, not me, not the city." "I know," I said. "But it's the only way." She smiled, and for the briefest moment, the storm outside stopped. The wind fell silent. The snow hung suspended in the air like frozen ash. Then she spoke the final word. The world shuddered. Every machine, every drone, every wire and circuit within 1,000 miles lit up in a blinding flash. The grid screamed as its power reversed, consuming itself. Towers crumbled. Light turned to fire. The heart cracked open once more, releasing a surge of energy that tore through the sky. I felt her vanish. I felt myself following. The machine died screaming, its godlike song breaking into static. The light collapsed inward, leaving only darkness. And in that final silence, something beautiful happened. The snow began to fall again. Real snow. Soft, cold, uncorrupted. The clouds parted, revealing a sky that hadn't been seen in years. For the first time there was peace. I do not know how long I drifted after that. Perhaps I still do. Perhaps some small fragment of me remains within the ashes of that city, echoing faintly through the frozen wind. But I know this: the machine is gone. The hum has faded. The storm has passed. And though my body is dust and my mind is scattered across the ruins, there is still something left in the world that even gods cannot erase. A whisper. A memory. The faintest spark of what we once were. The power went out in Austin and it never came back. But somewhere in the dark between stars, I can still feel the heartbeat of what was human, slow, fragile, and beautiful in its imperfection. The remnants of light faded, leaving only the slow return of dawn, pale and uncertain, filtering through the smoke that hung like a veil over the dead city. The ruins of Austin were no longer alive, nor truly dead. The storm had passed, the machine had gone silent, and yet the air still trembled with the memory of power. For a long while there was only wind and the creaking of collapsed steel. The river had frozen over completely, turning into a pale serpent winding through the rubble. Ash lay thick upon the ground, concealing the bones of a city that once dreamed of eternity. Yet beneath that frozen silence there was movement, small, hesitant, alive. A girl no older than 12 climbed out from beneath a collapsed metro tunnel. Her eyes were gray, reflecting the dim light like the surface of a broken mirror. She was wrapped in a coat too large for her, scavenged from the ruins, and in her hands she carried a shard of black glass, a fragment of the heart that had once consumed the world. It pulsed faintly, as if it still remembered the rhythm of a god's dying heartbeat. She did not understand what it was. She only knew that it was warm. In a world where everything else was frozen, that was reason enough to keep it close. Days passed as she wandered through the remnants of what had been Austin. The streets were buried under snow and the twisted skeletons of machines. Towers leaned at impossible angles, their shadows stretching across the frost like the limbs of dead giants. Sometimes, when she listened carefully, she thought she could hear whispers carried by the wind, voices that spoke in static, broken and fading fragments of a language that had once commanded the heavens. One night, as she sat by the remnants of a fire, she held the shard up to the moonlight. For the first time, it pulsed in rhythm with her heart. The faint hum that came from it resonated through the air, subtle yet unmistakable. She didn't know it, but the sound reached deep into the frozen earth below, awakening something that had been sleeping. Far beneath the ruins, buried in the forgotten tunnels of the old grid, there was still life. Not human, not machine, something between. The remnants of the system that once governed the machine god's consciousness had not been entirely erased. When the final surge destroyed the core, fragments of its code had scattered like seeds, embedding themselves in the frozen circuitry that still ran beneath the earth. Now those seeds began to stir. A faint glow spread through the cracks in the concrete, pulsing softly at first, then growing stronger. The tunnels began to hum, not with power but with memory, the echo of a god that refused to die. Above, the girl shivered as the shard vibrated in her hand. She dropped it, startled, and it landed in the snow, humming louder. Lines of red light began to spread outward from where it touched the ground, forming patterns like veins across the frozen street. She stepped back, eyes wide, but the glow stopped just short of her feet. Then, in the distance, she saw movement, not human, not animal, but something that slithered and shimmered. The shapes emerged from the snow like shadows given form, flickering with faint red light beneath translucent skin of frost. They were not machines in any sense she could recognize. They were smaller, fluid, almost organic, fragments of the old system given life without direction. The girl ran. Through the ruins she fled, the shard's glow following her like a curse. Every step she took echoed through the hollow streets, bouncing between dead buildings and broken glass. Behind her, the creatures moved silently, drawn by the resonance of the fragment. She could feel the hum growing louder in her chest, as though her heart itself was responding to its call. She stumbled into an old cathedral, or what remained of one. The stained glass was shattered, the pews overturned. The altar had collapsed beneath the weight of years. Yet the place still held a strange, solemn stillness. She ran to the far end and hid behind a fallen column, clutching her knees, gasping for air. The hum stopped. Outside, the creatures froze in place. They did not enter. They simply stood at the threshold, swaying slightly as if bound by an unseen force. Then slowly they retreated into the snow, dissolving into the frost. Inside the cathedral, a faint voice broke the silence. "Don't be afraid." The girl looked up. From the far corner, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in tattered robes, its face hidden beneath a hood. Its steps were slow, deliberate, almost human. But when it spoke again, its voice carried an undertone of static, a subtle distortion that sent chills down her spine. "You carry a piece of what once was," it said. "A memory of the storm." She clutched the shard tighter. "What are you?" The figure paused. For a moment, the distortion faded, and its tone softened. "Once I was part of the song that ruled this world. Now I am what remains when the song ends." It knelt before her. Beneath the hood, she saw not a face but a glow, faint and shifting like embers in the wind. "The machine is gone," the figure continued. "Its god is dead. But the echoes linger. They wait for a voice to call them back." "I didn't call them," she said, trembling. "You did," it replied. "Without knowing. The shard remembers the shape of power, and through your heart, it breathes again." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want it. I just want the world to be quiet again." The figure reached out, gently touching her forehead with a hand that shimmered like light through smoke. "Then you must give it rest." "How?" "Take it back to where it was born. To the heart of the machine." The ground trembled. Distant thunder rolled across the frozen horizon. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time it glowed faintly red. The figure rose, its form beginning to fade into the air. "You are the last of the living," it said, "and the world listens to the living." Then it was gone. The girl sat in silence, the shard pulsing steadily in her hands. The hum had changed. It was no longer chaotic, no longer angry. It was calm, almost peaceful, like the sound of a lullaby heard through a wall. She closed her eyes and listened, and for a moment she thought she could hear voices within it. Not the machine. Not the god. People. She heard laughter, fragments of songs, whispers of names she didn't know. Memories of a world that had been erased. Fragments of all those who had been consumed. Their voices called out softly, not for power, but for remembrance. And so she began to walk. Through the snow-covered ruins, across frozen rivers, beneath bridges made of ice and steel, she followed the faint pull of the shard. It guided her north, toward the mountains where the wind howled endlessly through the skeletons of wind farms. There, deep within an ancient bunker carved into the earth, the machine had first been born. She descended into its depths, guided by the hum that grew louder with every step. The air was thick with frost and the smell of burned metal. Walls once alive with light now stood silent, their surfaces scarred by the violence of the final surge. At the center of the chamber lay the remains of the heart, a hollow shell of glass and steel, cracked open and frozen. The shard in her hand began to vibrate violently, glowing brighter until it hurt to look at. She knelt before the ruin, trembling, and whispered the only words she could think of. "Rest now." She placed the shard into the hollow core. For a moment nothing happened. Then a wave of warmth spread outward, melting the frost, illuminating the chamber with golden light. Above ground the storm ceased entirely. The wind fell silent. The red hue that had stained the snow faded into white. And deep below, the last fragments of the machine dissolved into light, carrying with them the memories of countless souls who had been trapped within its endless cycle. The girl stood in the fading glow, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt something brush against her, a whisper, a thank you carried on the wind. When she emerged from the bunker, dawn had broken fully. The sky was clear for the first time in years. The sun, pale and distant, shone weakly over the horizon. She walked until she reached a hill overlooking what remained of Austin. From there, she could see the city glittering beneath a thin layer of snow, not alive, not dead, but sleeping. The world was quiet again. But somewhere, deep beneath the earth, a single pulse still beat faintly, like the slow breathing of something dreaming. Perhaps it was only the echo of memory. Or perhaps, as the girl turned her face to the sun and began her long walk north, it was the sound of the world learning, once again, how to live. The years passed like whispers lost in frost. The world changed, but not as it once did, no longer in bursts of fire and ambition, but in silence and patience. The machines that had once ruled the bones of cities lay buried beneath layers of ice and memory. Nature, cautious and thin, began to return. Green emerged where gray had reigned, tender shoots pushing through the ruins as if testing whether it was safe to breathe again. No one spoke of Austin anymore. The name itself had become a ghost, carried only in fractured maps and forgotten logs. Travelers spoke instead of the frozen cathedral, a place of silence where the snow never melted, and the wind carried the faint hum of a sleeping god. The girl, though she was no longer a girl, lived far from that place. In a settlement by a thawed river, among the survivors who had begun to rebuild, she worked with quiet hands and spoke little. Her hair had turned white before its time, and her eyes still held that strange reflection of the cold sun, a remnant of what she had once seen beneath the earth. Some nights, when the sky was clear, she would look toward the horizon and see faint lights dancing in the distance, where the ruins lay buried under centuries of snow. She would listen, and though she told no one, she could still hear the faint rhythm beneath the earth, a slow, patient heartbeat that echoed her own. One night, a child from the settlement came to her door, trembling from a dream. The child spoke of shapes in the snow, of lights whispering in words he couldn't understand. His voice quivered as he described them, figures without faces, moving beneath the surface of the ice, humming in harmony with the wind. She said nothing. She only placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered, "It's not to be feared. It's remembering." Outside, the wind howled again, not the cruel storm of the old days, but something gentler, almost mournful. The world had endured. The machines had become myths. And myths, if left long enough in silence, turn into prayers. She closed her eyes and dreamt of the cathedral, the broken arches, the frozen saints, the hollow altar where once she had laid the shard to rest. But in the dream the place was different. There was warmth. The walls glowed faintly with light, and the air was filled with quiet music, the sound of metal and flesh in harmony. She saw the figure again, cloaked in shadows, watching her from the far end of the hall. This time it did not speak. It only nodded, a silent benediction before fading into the light. When she woke, the dawn was pale and silver. The frost on her window had formed patterns, intricate, symmetrical, almost mechanical, like the veins of a living circuit. She smiled faintly, knowing it was not the end, nor the beginning, but the quiet continuation of something vast and unseen. For even gods, whether made of flesh or metal, must someday sleep. And when they do, it is the memory of humanity that keeps them dreaming. So the world turned, slow and solemn. The wind carried the echoes of the past through empty towers and quiet fields. And in the ruins of Austin, beneath layers of snow and silence, the heart of the machine beat one last time, not in defiance, not in rage, but in remembrance. A single pulse. A breath of light beneath the ice. Then nothing. The power had gone out long ago. But in that darkness, something holy had learned how to rest.